We know we need civilization and laws and procedures, but isn't it frustrating? Wouldn't it be great if we could just do what we needed to do? Lee Child.
You're listening to Writing Roots, brought to you by Aspen House Publishing.
Welcome to Writing Roots. I'm Lee Hull.
And I'm Lee Esses. Our episode today, we are talking about the thriller suspense genre, and we're also going to put horror in this category, not because the content is the same, but because your target audiences are very similar. The people who are reading Jack Reacher are also reading Odd Thomas.
So we'll get into the who, what, where, when, why of these genres, starting with who. The people who are going to be reading thriller and suspense are grown-ups. They are the people who had inclinations towards reading dystopian and sci-fi. They are going to want a lot of those thriller, the psychological things that go with it. I think especially they'll be the ones that lean towards the horror aspect of everything.
I also think if we look back on our favorite books as kids, a lot of the Goosebumps, the Animorphs, these kinds of stories, the people who are reading those are now grown-ups also reading other things. So those are going to be a lot of your target audience.
Especially with your thriller aspect, if you get into kind of that action thriller, you're going to see a lot of your Gen X and your boomers who are interested in Tom Clancy style stories, Jack Reacher style stories. Another category that you will find with the Who, with the thriller and suspense, are women who like to read and listen to true crime podcasts, where they are interested in the criminal mindset. They are going to be reading a lot of your especially psychological thrillers, your suspense novels.
If you're working towards slightly younger target audiences, you will have more females reading the stories, but for the most part, if you have a dude that's reading books, it's either going to be epic fantasy or, more often than not, thriller, suspense, horror.
You will also see a lot of people who have action within their daily life already or within their past history enjoying these kinds of books, especially when it's well done. You'll look at veterans who really like to read Reacher because Reacher is a veteran and they can understand that vigilante desire.
You'll also have law enforcement characters, you'll have detectives, these kinds of characters as your heroes, because your readers can trust that you aren't screwing up the guns. They care about the martial arts and these kinds of things because they have experience in some regard there. So the people that you might see as heroes on an everyday basis, these might be good people to connect with your main character.
As for the what of thriller, suspense, horror, your covers, they are going to be bold. There's going to be a couple of bright colors. Your font is usually going to be a bold sans serif, something like an impact, more often than not.
You're also going to see a lot of silhouettes of your main character in different poses with different colors around them for different books in the series. So we can still see ourselves as the main character to a certain extent. We know who this guy is because of his silhouette.
As for the content, most of these books are going to be modern day. Sometimes recent history, but it's usually set in a time where people either lived and experienced it or a very popular recent history setting. Like you'll see a lot of World War II in your thriller suspense category.
But something that's familiar, so we don't have to rely on a whole bunch of world building in order to understand how the story plays out. Another thing that you're going to see, you're not really going to have that ensemble type storytelling. That main character is signature to the entire series.
That hero is going to have a very particular set of skills, often with a tragic or dark backstory. But because of that, because of their past, they are going to be very skilled at something.
Your main hero, especially if they're male, is also going to have a past or present profession that is in line with your target audience. If your main audience that you're trying to market to are detectives, guess what? Your main character is probably going to be at least a PI, if not a detective themselves.
The gender will also usually match your target audience. So if you are writing for men, you're going to write a male main character. Jack Reacher, Jack Ryan, whatever. If you are writing for women, you're going to have a female main character. I look at the book series that inspired the show Bones.
Even if you don't call it that, this series will be called based on your main character. The Jack Reacher novels are called Jack Reacher novels because Jack Reacher shows up. The Dresden Files, the main character's name is Dresden.
The other thing that you're going to need to contain is a clear villain early on. A previously arrested psycho escapes jail on a technicality or whatever. There are exceptions within the thriller category on this, because sometimes you'll have that we don't quite know who's actually the bad guy throughout it. Most of the time, there's going to be a clear villain early.
Having a true good and evil can be really helpful in these types of stories. I think that's where a lot of Reacher fell apart for me, was the author started sympathizing more with the bad guys than Reacher, and kind of vilifying Reacher in a couple of ways. But when it was clear this guy needs to get his nose turned inside out, we can trust Jack Reacher's the guy to do it.
The other thing you need to be careful with the contents of the book is when it comes to romance. You ultimately have 3 options. You have the adrenaline builds up hormones and things happen because chemicals.
That would be the Dresden Files, that sort of thing, where there was this on again, off again love interest throughout the stories.
Then you can have your love 'em and leave 'em hero.
That would be more Jack Reacher, where he's got a different girl every book.
And then your third option is simply no romance at all.
That would be your Gray Man series, that's Mark Greaney. I haven't read all of them yet, but he doesn't really have any romance happening because too many things are blowing up and getting in his way.
When you are going to be publishing these books is often most popular in October or November, associating with the spooky times in the world, the darkness as it settles. Of course, we are talking Northern Hemisphere when we're saying the spooky times.
We also have Halloween and these kinds of things. I think at least half of the Dresden Files books, I don't know when they were released, but the setting is sometime during the month of October, which is, of course, thematic for the stories.
I think that there is a feeling in the air around that time that that's when we are most likely to believe that something else is out there waiting just around the corner, whether that is a crazy person with a chainsaw or ghosty things that mess with people.
When we're talking about where you're in person, the first place you're going to look is the profession of your main character. If they do investigative work, then find out who the investigators are and get in contact with the people that they follow, the radio stations that they listen to or whatever. If they're veterans, touch in with the Veterans Hall wherever you are. Part of the fun of this series is anybody could be that character.
Another good resource for this is your radio stations, your local radio stations, because a lot of the older generations that are reading this genre are listening to the radio. So they are most likely going to fit within your target audience.
Social media is not going to be as strong, and that online advertising not quite as potent as your in-person, but connecting with other thriller readers. So in my case, connecting with people who are reading the Dresden Files, people who are reading the Reacher novels, connecting with these people in communities will help me get an idea of what they're looking for and when they're looking for stuff and that kind of thing, because I'm already part of my own target audience.
And you can use that connection in your advertising online as well. You can post a book and say something like, "It's Dresden meets Reacher." And it gives people a fairly clear idea of what to expect. Why do people read thriller, suspense, horror? It's largely because people like the puzzle. They like trying to figure it out before the main character does and racing the hero to the answer.
We also like figuring out how we would solve it. We've been given the same clues as your main character, but I think we should investigate the bookkeeper instead of the mafioso because it's money related or whatever. We like to contemplate how we would do it, which is why I think a lot of the true crime fans really like this genre as well.
It is important to keep in mind that it is the hero that keeps us coming back. It is their sense of humor, their personality, whatever it is that makes them special that keeps people connected to a series. I haven't read a lot of Reacher, but from what I have heard and seen, a lot of the disconnect and fall within the Reacher's fandom is when Reacher started to change.
But it's Reacher's mercurial nature, his need to not be pinned down to anywhere, and solve crimes and help people wherever he goes. We like that about him, because we wish we could live a life with no strings attached. Dresden's dry sense of humor and his self-deprecating sense of humor, perfect for this character. If he stopped being humorous, he would stop being Dresden, and I would stop returning to these books.
And it is for this reason, the hero that keeps bringing us back, why the titles are centered around those characters. Because that's what people like in these books. They like the characters, they like the puzzle, they like being connected and working their brains just a little bit without any real stakes for themselves.
So when you're writing your main character, please fall in love with them, because if you don't, then your audience just won't connect with them either. Enjoy all of their weird quirks and make it part of who they are, so that at Comic-Con somebody can play your character and someone else can go, I know who that is. If you love your character, then your audiences will flock to it. But you can't love them if you don't
Write selfishly.
If you have a question or comment for our hosts or a topic you'd like us to cover, send us an email at writingroots@aspenhousepublishing.com or find us on Facebook by searching for Aspen House Publishing.